Okay. Welcome, everybody. This is Nick Astor, founder and publisher of TriplePundit.com. Welcome once again to our weekly Google Hangout series. This week we have a very special hangout, a whole panel assembled for you on the topic of zero waste. We're going to get into the definition of exactly what that means, plus learn a lot more about ULE's Zero Waste Certification Program and what that means. With some brief introductions, joining me today are Scott Case, he's Director of Markets Development for UL Environment. Also, Diane Scher, she's the Environmental Manager at Bridgestone America's Tire Operations. Raymond Randall from Waste Management is here as well as Martin Groman from GAF Roofing. I'd like to give you guys a second to introduce yourselves. Just tell us a little bit about who you are in a minute or less, and then we'll roll right in with the chat. Scott, you want to kick us off?
Sure. Thank you very much, Nick. So my name is Scott Case. I'm a Markets Development Director with UL Environment, and UL is in the world of validating and certifying environmental claims to build trust in the green marketplace. Nick?
Great. Thanks, Scott. How about Raymond?
Thanks, Nick. My name is Raymond Randall. I'm a managing principal with Waste Management and Sustainability Services. We're a sort of an in-house consulting group that works with a lot of our large Fortune 500 type companies, helping them develop enterprise-wide sustainability solutions, not only in terms of energy and water, but also waste, and helping them figure out how to develop and implement zero waste plans across their enterprise.
Sounds good. Diane?
Hi, I'm an environmental manager with the tire manufacturing plants and distribution centers at Bridgestone. Tire plant, the Wilson plant that was the first plant to get their zero waste to landfill claim certified by ULE in conjunction with working with Waste Management.
Excellent. And Martin?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Marty Groman. I'm based up in Maine, and but I get to work on behalf of GAF nationally. You may know us for the Timberline asphalt shingle or Everguard or Energy Guard commercial roofing products. And I'm really passionate about recycling and waste prevention generally. I'm numb enough to pick up a piece of scrap of paper the size of a business card and recycle it. Of course, on things like we're all working on here today, we're talking about massive amounts of material being diverted from landfill. So it's really great.
Got it. So I want to kick it off with just starting with a little bit of a basic definition. You know, this term zero waste sounds like a wonderful thing. Sounds pretty logical to me. Who wants waste, right? What does it actually mean, though? Scott, I thought you might be a good person to kick that off. Define the term.
Sure, very good. Well, you would think it's a nice, simple term, something like zero waste, but UL Environment actually jumped into this, if you will, when we realized there were more than a dozen different definitions of the word zero. So just for clarity's sake, UL Environment has come out with the radical notion that zero means zero. So if you are talking about 100% waste diversion, you're talking about zero waste, that means you've actually got systems in place to track, manage, and properly recycle or dispose of all of the waste in a manner suitable according to the standard. So there are lots of different definitions. People say, oh, we mean zero, everything except this, or everything except that. We've actually come out with a definition. It's about 12 to 14 pages long that defines the word zero as zero.
Okay, and this might be an obvious question, but why is this becoming such a big deal today? What's increasing the importance of this concept?
Well, I think what you'll see, and I know Raymond and the others can jump in here, but what we're seeing is that more and more companies are looking for ways to actually improve their environmental performance and to demonstrate their environmental commitments. So what we see is reducing waste is a great way to save money, but it also has some PR benefits. And so we're seeing companies that are working aggressively with companies like Waste Management and others to reduce their waste, but then they want to kind of get proud and boastful and tell everybody about it. The challenge is that their aspiration, their desire to go to zero waste sometimes exceeds their ability. So what we're trying to do with the standard is just establish a level playing field so that everybody is using the same definitions and the same metrics, because once they're doing that, we can all take a look and find out who's truly zero waste and who might be a stellar star at, say, an 85% reduction, which in some industries is a huge number.
Got it, got it. And Raymond, if you want to jump in here as well, I'd be curious to hear the perspective from a company that is, you know, all about managing waste management. Tell me a little bit more about why this is relevant. I mean, intuitively I sense that this is a good thing, a good idea. But tell me a little bit more about what's driving this. Is this, you know, a matter of basic health and environmental concerns? Is it really core to a CSR effort? Just tell me a little bit more about sort of what's driving all of this, why it's important, and if anyone else wants to jump in as well, you're welcome to as well.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Great question, and I think you hit on a couple of things that are driving the importance of this. I think, as Scott said, traditionally a lot of companies have been pursuing sustainability more and more aggressively now, and they initially tackled energy and water. That was sort of phase one of their sustainability plans, and I think a lot of them are now focusing on waste, or have started to over the last number of years. And I think traditionally they measured diversion historically for sort of internal, almost anecdotal purposes related more to resource efficiency, as Scott was saying. But I think today the focus is really broadening to include an external focus. Diversion metrics are being utilized in things like corporate sustainability reports, CSR reports, supplier scorecards, SEC filings, LEED certifications, even carbon disclosure project submittals as it relates to Scope 3 emissions. So it's being utilized a lot more externally, and I think it's become therefore a lot more strategic and competitive issue than it was for companies in the past.
Okay, and so, and again, if anyone else wants to jump in, I want to give everybody an opportunity here, but I'm curious to hear a little bit more about sort of how UL fits in with all of this. Scott, you went on about the standards, how you exactly validate what these claims are. Can we get into a little bit more of the details about, you know, without going through the quote 16 or 20 pages or whatever you said it was defining zero, but give us the gist of what that all means, or a little bit of an awareness of the scope of how this whole thing gets validated, and then that question is really for everybody. But Scott, why don't you start us with it?
Sure, and it might be fair to kind of step back and just kind of explain, you know, why UL. And part of it is, you know, UL goes back 120 years certifying the safety of products. The computer on your desk, the lights, the wires, and the walls have probably all been certified by UL because UL started by certifying safety which is invisible. You can't look at a toaster, for example, and see that it's safe. You can't look at a toaster and know that it's not going to burst into flames. So UL took this concept that was safety that's invisible and said, look, if it has a UL mark on it, you know it's safe. Well, the environmental field is exactly the same scenario. I can't look at a factory and know intuitively if it's zero waste. I can't buy a box of crackers and go, oh yeah, it was made in a zero waste factory. There needs to be some process for making that invisible feature visible to people that care about it. So UL built a standard so that we can actually make the invisible zero waste concept visible and meaningful to people. So the standard itself actually spells out a very simple mathematical formula that basically boils down to how much stuff did you throw away, plus how much stuff did you incinerate without recovering some sort of the waste, and divide it by all of the discarded materials. So skipping the fancy math, it basically says, you know, what percentage of stuff have you thrown away versus percentage of stuff you didn't have to throw away. But we go through it by actually reviewing transactional records, we review shipping records, we touch base with companies like Waste Management to find out what kind of recyclables were pulled out of the facility. We talk with everyone on the loading dock. We actually inspect the facility, walk the floor, make sure they in fact are separating the various kinds of recyclable materials and compostable materials. We interview the employees and make sure that the company's doing what they're reporting that they're doing. We've got a variety of kind of spot check ways that we can make sure that the numbers that we build into our formula are in fact accurate. And then once you've been certified, we reserve the right to kind of randomly stop in at various points just to check and make sure things are still moving forward nicely. We've also kind of, by partnering with good, strong partners, we've got the ability to kind of double check numbers kind of on the sly. So it's a very interesting system that's all designed to help a company make sure they're doing what they're saying. It's a way to help the company improve their internal processes, but it's also a way for us to tell the consumers, hey, this company truly is at an 87% diversion rate, or this company truly has made it all the way to the, the holy grail of zero waste.
Got it. And Raymond, tell me a little bit about how you guys play ball with that at Waste Management.
Yeah, I think it's been important for our customers to, as we've worked with them over the years, to implement diversion strategies. It's helpful to find systems like UL to help validate the work that they've done. I think if you look at, Scott went through the process that their companies go through when they go through their certification. I think businesses and consumers, they're really craving that kind of clarity and transparency in the market. I think businesses are looking for some type of common standard that really allows them to compare apples to apples. And at the same time, consumers are both more educated and skeptical about these kinds of claims, and so they tend to latch on to certifications that really provide that clarity and transparency. So it works well for us to work with a company like UL to help bring that clarity and transparency to the work that we've helped them achieve through their diversion programs. And I think building on top of that, you've got competitors and industry trade associations that are really scrutinizing these claims quite more aggressively and frequently than they were in the past. So I think having this kind of trusted third-party company like UL validate these kinds of claims has far more weight in the marketplace than a self-proclaimed status.
Got it. I thought it was important to hear from Diane and Marty. You guys are both representing big manufacturers. You produce a lot of stuff. Presumably there's, or at least used to be, a lot of waste in that process. Diane, maybe you could kick us off a little bit on what's happening at Bridgestone and
Sure.
where you are in this path.
Sure. We've been on this path for many years, several years, going back, and we've been measuring our waste to landfill and how much we recycle. We've improved greatly step by step. We charge the plants with doing what makes sense and good for business and good for the environment. And in 2000, the Wilson plant was able to achieve 100% landfill diversion, or zero waste to landfill. And when they were looking at that, they said, what can we do to show this to the world? We looked around and saw that other companies, as Scott had said, some of them say that they're 100% or zero waste to landfill, and they might be 95% or 97%. And we wanted to show that zero meant zero. So we worked with Waste Management and Underwriters Lab to get our claim certified. And at the Wilson plant, it's zero meant zero. And we have several other plants actually that have also achieved zero waste to landfill, and we're very proud of their achievements. And it was difficult. We have a particular waste that's designed not to come apart and not to be and to be stable. It's our it's rubber with the steel wire, and so that was very difficult to get to have a beneficial reuse, and we did, and we had to demonstrate that to Underwriters Lab that was the best possible use, and in conjunction with Waste Management, we were able to do that.
Got it. And Marty, at JAF, similar story, or?
Yeah, thanks, Nick. I mean, when I joined the company, I guess coming up on 5 years ago, we had the chance to visit a bunch of the plants, and we had two of them in particular that really had focused on zero waste initiatives extremely well, and I basically self-certified them as zero waste to landfill, which was a legitimate claim. We had one instance where the last item looking for recycling, to give you an idea, was a label backing. So basically the backing that they would use for like a shipping label. So they had it down to that level, and really an impressive effort. And we did some publicity around that, but we just felt like it would be great to have it's one thing if we say it, but frankly, it's another thing if UL says it. So that's when we brought UL in to to work on certifying a couple of our plants, and now looking at a third one. So, it's been a good initiative for us. It's great to have an outside pair of eyes and just be creative in thinking about solutions to recycling problems. Because, like Diane said, you've always got these bogeys, these challenges, or these materials that it's kind of hard to find a home for. So it's great to have another set of eyes to look at it.
Got it. So a quick question about this actual validation process, and I guess this is back to you, Scott and Raymond. Obviously, when you're just getting started, you're not necessarily at zero waste. You might not even be close. You may not even have a path to knowing how to get to zero waste. So how can getting started on this validation process still be a valuable thing to do at that point?
Raymond, you want to start there?
Sure. I think most companies are striving for continuous improvement. So whether they've achieved a certain level or not at this point, they're still looking at improving their operations. So I think instead of just putting a check in a box and moving on to something else, I think UL Standard provides a measuring stick by which they can continually evaluate their progress. And having it as a tiered system really allows a company to continually raise the bar. They might achieve a certain level one year, but then set a goal to achieve the next level the next year or a couple of years down the road. And I think a lot of things can really impact a company's diversion rate: manufacturing and service processes, material and resource utilization, technologies to extract and manage the value of these materials, and even markets to close the loop and utilize this reclaimed material. So the potential diversion rate for companies really continues to increase. So I think it's important for them to continually measure their success, whether they've achieved a certain level or not.
And kind of building off of that, what's really nice about the working relationship we have with Waste Management, UL is playing the role of the auditor. We are, in some ways, the cops, if you will. A company like Waste Management is able to actually work with a company and help them develop the internal practices that will allow them to meet the definitions of zero waste in the UL standard. So Waste Management can kind of play in that space. Our role at UL is actually to step in afterwards as the independent judge, to take a look and say, have they in fact done everything they intended to do? Have they done everything they're saying they're doing? Do we have the documentation? Do we have the proof that they actually are meeting, their 89% waste diversion goal, or their 95% waste diversion goal, or their zero waste? So we actually have an expert team of auditors led by a woman named Karen Beretta, who's done a great job of making sure everyone actually understands, all the auditors understand this is exactly what kind of documentation and proof they need to provide. So the auditors will go on site, they'll take a look at everything, follow all of the checklists. That information then flows back to UL, where someone else on Karen's team takes a final look, kind of as another double check, before someone says, hey, congratulations, here's the UL validation badge, wave it in pride, or wave it with pride.
Got it. Good explanation. I want to go back to Diane and Marty to hear a little bit about your own experiences going through this validation process. Does it kind of mirror what Scott said, and ultimately, what kind of value have you seen from going through this whole process? Diane, you want to tell us your side of the story?
Sure. We were several rounds of back and forth with underwriters labs in the audit process, and they did the validation just like they said. They audited our disposal facilities, they audited our process on site, they audited our records, and they proved that they were auditable and on target. So they validated that our records were done properly, and that what we said we were doing. We've seen some benefits from this. When we got the certification, we announced it, and we've had a lot of positive feedback from it, and it's been very beneficial in our community. We have in the Wilson County, they have a sustainability group that meets, and we're glad to see our our progress and our achievement and very complimentary. And we've had several folks come out to the plant and say, we want to see what you're doing. We want to see what you're doing. We had our community, our teammates, our employees, they take these practices home and do it at home. It's really good to see what the ripples throughout the community, and it energizes them and re-energizes us, and it's been a real positive experience.
Great. Marty, your experience?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Just going back to something that Scott said, you know, it is a little bit like the recycling police coming in to review the plant, you know. But that's been a good process for that. We've had a good experience with it. We had a situation I can think of where we had a vendor that was billing. We happen to have two plants in the same city, and the vendor, with no malintent, just a mistake, something historical, that was billing both plants for the same haul. So we were able to track that down, and we saved some money that way. I can think of another instance where obviously we're spending time looking in dumpsters, and we had a situation where there was cardboard building up in the receiving area, and it was obvious, and it turned out, you know, there just wasn't a cardboard dumpster in that area. Sounds like a small thing, but that, you know, when you're getting into the last few percent, you know, those are the kinds of things you want to track down. So we were able to improve the efficiency on behalf of the plant by going through that audit. So, you know, overall, a rewarding process.
Raymond, a quick question for you. I wondered if you might tell us a little bit about one of the biggest events of the year for waste management, or at least the big publicly facing events, is your involvement with the Phoenix Open golf tournament. Anything you could tell us about the process of what you did with that tournament, and that echoes a little bit of what Diane and Marty were explaining?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. You know, the Waste Management Phoenix Open, it's a tremendous event. It's the largest event on the PGA Tour. This year we had over 560,000 spectators. But for Waste Management, it's really more than just a golf event for us to put our name on. It's really an opportunity for us to showcase what's possible when we design with intent. So Waste Management issued a zero waste challenge over the last couple of years to see if we could design this event so that we could create zero waste landfill. We had an incredibly talented team that analyzed every aspect of this event and made sure that every item utilized or brought on to the course was either reusable, compostable, or recyclable. In the last few years, we didn't even have any trash containers anywhere on the course, so it was a tremendous accomplishment. And when we implemented this goal, we decided that it would be useful for us to work with UL to really validate that claim. And so, much like what Marty and Diane indicated, UL actually came out onto the course, walked the course, made sure they understand all the processes that had been put in place, understood all the materials that were being generated throughout the course of the event and what the plan was for all of those. And then there was sort of the second half of that, where they were back in their office and we're sending them receipts and waste slips for all the materials that were sent to the different types of processes that we'd lined up to help manage and extract more value from the materials there. So it was a great process for us. We worked well with UL on that, and I think having that UL claim validation really brought credibility to our efforts there. The transparency and the clarity of the claim validation really communicates exactly what we achieved.
Got it. We're getting close to our half an hour, but I have one last important question that I thought would be for Scott, but I'd like to ask all four of you, because I think it'll be interesting to hear what you have to say. It's basic. Go back to when you were just getting started with all of this at your respective companies and with the companies that you've been working with. Give us a little bit of advice for a company that's just getting started with this process. Scott, you want to kick us off? I mean, what would you say to a company that's just new to this idea?
I think
the
there's
validation and the concept, I guess.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that you need to do. First of all, make sure that any public statement that you're making, any public goal is achievable and doable, right? You've got to avoid things like greenwashing. So one of the ways to avoid greenwashing is to make sure you are intimately familiar with the UL standard, so you know exactly what the standard requires. And then you can actually design backwards from that standard. so that if you know these are the things that you're going to have to be able to measure, make sure you're building systems in place that allows you to measure each of the different streams. And I think one of the kind of key things to keep in mind too is the standard is designed to be a global standard. In some parts of the world, incineration is a necessity, right? But the UL standard actually requires, if there's any incineration at all, you have to spell out exactly what the amount is. And the standard puts a cap on that. So those are all really important things to understand, because other people's definition of zero waste allows them to, for example, incinerate everything, or it allows them to exclude certain areas. So step one is be very, very familiar with that UL standard. And I think as I pass it off to Raymond, I might say one of the other things that might be helpful is having an outside expert help you design your systems. But Raymond, I'll toss it to you with that thought.
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, I would say one of the first steps also is to help get that really diverse team of stakeholders together that really understands the goal, understands the UL standard, and is really willing to rethink the company's processes and services. Where are those opportunities that you can change things so that you can be increasing the diversion rate? And then build in on what Scott said, I think you've got to work closely with a service provider like Waste Management that can really help you innovate and optimize and figure out ways to manage these materials in a manner that extracts more value from them. And then as you continue to progress, you've got to continually measure, stay abreast of developments that are going to bring about that next jump in the diversion rate, and continually apply it against the UL standard.
Diane, any advice to those just getting started?
Yeah, that's a great segue to what I was going to say about our work, because we started this, like you're saying, with focus on our waste, and it's a matter of each. It's like every pound by pound. It's not a one-size-fits-all or one solution. Is going to work on all waste stream and all waste types of waste. So we have to look at each waste type and continually evaluate what's the best option for it. And we still have a lot of ongoing work, and it's just like we are starting from the beginning again, each time working on our waste and getting more and more value out of it. So that's how I would frame my answer, in line with what Raymond was saying.
Marty, final thoughts and advice?
Yeah, I think it doesn't have to be complex. I mean, if you look to Raymond's point about the Phoenix Open, I like that. I mean, if you're procuring this material and you're not making it into something that you ship and sell, then why are you procuring it? And so you see a lot of examples. We in our Cobra Ridge Vent factory, where they make a product that is preloaded with nails. For ease of installation, we were acquiring boxes of nails, and these boxes of nails were individually shrink wrapped. Now, I mean, why would that be? It wasn't necessary, and that's a pretty hard material in small quantities to deal with, to recycle. So it was more involving the procurement and the purchasing team for much of the journey, and that's kind of interesting. The other thing I'll say is it really is, at least initially, pretty straightforward. I made a little matrix of items that need to be recycled down the left side and all of the plant locations along the top, and actually you can see that on gaf.com/green. It's live to share. Get in touch with me and I'll share it with you. So we don't want to make this sound too difficult. It's a matter of focusing and just ticking off the materials one by one, and don't buy it if you don't need it, right? Sounds straightforward. So it's been a really good journey in that way.
Well, everybody, this is just terrific to hear about all the progress that everyone's making. This is really one of those sort of holy grail issues, the concept of zero waste and the actual process by which we're approaching getting there. So I wanted to thank you all for taking the time to join us. Thanks very much to the folks who joined us online. You can continue to follow along with our partnership with UL Environment at TriplePundit.com. There are a bunch of free white papers you can download on issues beyond zero waste, which we think you'll find interesting. And again, thanks to all of you for joining us. We hope we'll have a chance to do it again sometime.
Hey, thanks, Nick.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone.
Bye from Maine. Cheers.